My name is Tom Dion. I'm a PhD student here at the University of Birmingham. I just started in October, um, and I'm working on mathematics in the School of Computer Science. Okay, so right now the topic is not fully set out yet because I just started, but it will definitely have to do something with univalent mathematics, and probably models of this. But the next 6 months, the main objective is to actually settle on a topic. So I hope to do that. I got interested in this through some seminars while I was doing the masters, and then this PhD position was advertised, and took a look at the research group, and I saw that all these people were basically doing stuff that I was interested in and that I found interesting. So then I started to apply, and I felt like a lot of things come together. So a lot of areas that I enjoyed doing a master's, so category theory or constructive mathematics, kind of came together. And at the same time, I did a computer science bachelor, and now I could also do computer science. So for me, it was like a lot of things coming together at once. So that made it very interesting for me. Well, I mean, through these workshops, we basically hope that we have a lot more contributors and a lot more people working on the library. And I think if we keep doing things like that, then it can really grow and be a big thing and be really successful. And also maybe diverge on different kinds of mathematics and see what the impact of univalence is there. But yeah, so this was the first event on unimath for me, and I really enjoyed helping so many people. And what surprised me the most, actually, and maybe this says something about the future of unimath, is the wide variety of people that come to these kind of events. So there's basically people from, say, 16-year-olds to 60-year-olds from all over the world, and everybody seems to be interested. So in a way, it's hard to predict the future of unimath because it attracts such a wide audience. But I'm quite optimistic about it. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I've used it before on a project, and I really loved being able to formalize my mathematical work and be sure that it was correct. And in fact, at some point, I made a small mistake, but then I could just fix the mistake in the script and run the whole thing, and it just still worked. So I could be confident that this didn't influence the entire proof, and it was still correct. So I would definitely say that it helps me in my everyday work. That's a tough question. I would say, well, maybe, but at the very least, mathematicians have a language, let's say. So we have a way of speaking of things, and we're not always aware of that. But once you start talking to people that are not mathematicians, and you say particular things, and then you find out that you mean different things and you talk in a particular way. So I'm not really sure whether mathematics is a language, probably to some extent, but it's definitely true that mathematicians have a language. That's definitely the case. I think the beauty of mathematics, at least to me, is that it's something that we create, and everything in there is like an intellectual puzzle, um, and it's so wonderfully abstract, and that makes it really nice. And then at the same time, you can actually apply it to the real world, right? People use this in physics and biology, in chemistry. So it's not just for my enjoyment, right? But actually, it's useful as well. But the part that I find the most appealing, honestly, is the fact that we construct something and we keep challenging ourselves to make it, to develop it further and do new things. That's what I find the most interesting about it.
Um,
I think that would be really great. I think more people should do that. Um, I think you shouldn't be. Sometimes there's a tendency that mathematicians is only for really clever people somehow. Um, But you shouldn't be scared by that. You should just try and start doing things. And if you enjoy it, then don't be ashamed. Just do it. I think it would be great if a lot more young people went into mathematics.
I'm Adam Epstein. I'm a mathematician. I work at University of Warwick, which is in Coventry in the United Kingdom. Want to know like my research background thing, or? All right, well, that's complicated. So I guess my primary research identity is in holomorphic dynamics of one complex variable, things like iterating polynomials and considering Julia sets and studying parameter spaces of iterated polynomials and rational maps and so on. And I've been involved with various aspects of this. There are analytic aspects, there are arithmetic aspects. But I also, separately from this, I also have deep interest in foundations of mathematics. So I've studied a lot of set theory on my own, and I've even, kind of recreationally proved a little theorem in set theory. And because of that interest, I've just been studying more foundational topics to get a broader background in logic. So things like topos theory I was studying, and because of that I became aware of this new direction, homotopy type theory. So when this particular conference was announced, I got excited and came here. Hard, I don't know what to say. I mean, there's a beauty in it, but I mean, the thing is, apparently not everybody sees it. So the difficulty is to convince people who don't realize that there's a beauty about how they should look for it, I guess. And maybe that comes more naturally to some people than others. I think there's also, I think sometimes people don't realize, people don't necessarily appreciate how much mathematics they actually can understand or like, because they don't really know what qualifies as mathematics. So I think people who aren't mathematicians don't necessarily realize that logical reasoning of all sorts is very, very close to mathematics and even counts as mathematics. So for example, okay, here's a good, so I've been reading just recently, but just recently before coming here, but also off and on for many years, there's a subject called combinatorial game theory, surreal numbers. I mean, it's a certain analysis of games, like Go, for example. Although Go is, a very, very difficult game, but in principle, it's about things like that. But NIM is a good example. I had an first-year undergraduate come in and ask me about this, and anyhow, the examples, the actual games, you can play them as games. You could teach you draw a picture. One of these is called Hackenbush. You draw a picture, and there are red and blue segments, and then one player removes the blue and the other removes the red. And there are rules about you want to make the last move and what the strategy should. Whole mathematical theory based on this, where you actually reconstruct the real number system and so on and so forth. But meanwhile, you can just sit and approach these as games and wonder, what would it take for me to win this game if I'm playing the other person? And the thing is, ordinary people who aren't mathematicians, who don't think they like mathematics, do things like this all the time. They have to get around in the world, and they enjoy them sometimes, and they don't necessarily realize that how close this is to what qualifies as mathematics. So I think if there was a way to convey to people that they actually do know some mathematics, people say, I don't know mathematics, or they actually do know some mathematics, they just don't recognize it. Do like some mathematics, they just don't recognize it. So I don't know how to actually, the difficulty is to figure out ways to do that. That's where a gifted teacher comes in. But I think that people who aren't involved in mathematics have perhaps a very, very restricted view of what it is. They think it's just a lot of adding numbers, or tediously checking that someone's added numbers correctly, or something, and therefore aren't giving themselves an opportunity to actually see the enjoyable part. That's just a guess. Many years ago, I tried to read the homotopy type theory book, and I found it very, very difficult. It was too early for me. And I had an undergraduate student who was trying to read it, and it was much too early for him. And then I subsequently decided that if I wanted to learn homotopy type theory, I should first learn some homotopy theory or some type theory. Now, I'm more of a mathematician than a logician. And I'm not a topologist, I'm not a homotopy theorist, but my advisor was a topologist, a homotopy theorist. And I have some topology background, so I know where to look. So I spent a lot of time last year reading various texts in homotopy theory to try to get an maybe to bring my understanding of homotopy theory from like the 1920s into the 1960s, a more modern categorical presentation, which is what's more relevant to this discussion here. I mean, nowadays, of course, people study infinity categories, and this is, but anyway, so I mean, I have done some self-study in the last few years, and I feel a little bit more comfortable now. So it's funny. I go to these lectures, and some parts I understand, and some parts are completely weird and crazy. Just so the whole style of presentation of mathematics, and I don't know, since I don't know the people here, I don't know if it seems weird and crazy to everybody, because what Andre says is, when students learn things this way for the first time, it seems completely natural. I have no idea, what your background is or what, how much set, my foundations of mathematics background is set theory. It was what this discussion was going out before. I can't help but think in set theory. Although I know that it's good for me to try to think other ways, and I actually do try to think categorically as much as possible, and I would like to see categorical foundations. Now, this is just even more radical, because here you're not even assuming logic. You're just, all of that is somehow part of the mathematics, which is a strange thing for me. I'm used to the idea that there's, a logical formalism, and then we discuss our mathematics on top of this logical formalism, and here it's somehow the reverse. So it's interesting to see something so strange. It's also a little bit unsettling. So the week before I was here, I was at a conference in Barcelona in my research area. Although, as I've said, it was sort of in a particular direction of my research area that I haven't been involved in lately. So there have been all these new developments in it, but still, all of the people my age are familiar, all of the questions are familiar, the pictures are familiar, it's progress. And then, and I'm one of the older people in the subject, right? And then I come here and it's like being a first-year graduate student, which is actually more. Well, I personally think mathematics is incredibly interesting. I can't help thinking about mathematics, but that's because I've been doing it my whole, suppose.